The winter of 2019 was one of the coldest Chicago had seen in more than a decade. Snow fell in thick, heavy sheets, and the wind cut through the streets like a blade. People walked fast, heads down, scarves pulled tight around their faces. Nobody wanted to stop. Nobody wanted to look up. Everyone was fighting their own cold, their own hurry, their own problems. Daniel Mercer was no different. He was 34 years old, a single father, and a man who had learned early in life that the world did not slow down for anyone. He woke up every morning at 5:30, packed a lunch for his 9-year-old son Eli, dropped him off at school by 7, and then drove his old blue Ford truck across the city to work a double shift at a warehouse on the south side. He came home tired every night, made dinner, helped Eli with homework, and fell asleep on the couch more often than in his bed. This was his life. It was hard, but it was his, and he carried it without complaint. Eli was a quiet boy with large brown eyes and a serious face that made him look older than he was. He liked drawing maps of places he had never been and reading library books about animals. He rarely caused trouble. He rarely asked for much. But lately, Daniel had noticed something that worried him deeply. Eli had started getting tired faster than usual. He would come home from school and go straight to the couch. His lips sometimes looked a little blue after they walked just one block outside. He complained of chest pain twice in the past month. Daniel told himself it was the cold. He told himself Eli was just growing. But deep inside, a fear was growing too, quiet and heavy, sitting in his chest like a stone. The morning it all began was a Thursday. Daniel had just finished his shift and was walking to the parking lot when he realized he had forgotten to renew the truck's permit. He could not drive it until Monday without risking a fine he absolutely could not afford. So he decided to take the bus home. It was a long ride, almost an hour, with 2 transfers. He did not mind. He pulled his coat tighter and walked to the nearest bus stop on Meridian Avenue. The bus stop was mostly empty. A young woman with headphones stood at one end. An old man sat on the bench with a grocery bag between his feet. And at the far corner of the stop, barely visible through the falling snow, stood an elderly woman. She was small and thin, with white hair that the wind was pulling in every direction. She wore a long gray skirt, a thin blouse, and what looked like a light cardigan that was doing absolutely nothing against the freezing temperature. She had no hat, no gloves, no scarf. Her arms were crossed tightly over her chest, and she was shaking. Not just shivering, shaking. The kind of shaking that happens when a body is losing the fight against the cold. Daniel looked at her and then looked away. He was tired. He had worked 11 hours. His own coat was the only warm thing he had on. It was a good coat, dark green, thick lining, bought 3 winters ago when he had a little more money. He needed it. But he looked at her again. Her lips were pale. Her fingers were turning red. She was not a young woman. She looked to be in her late 70s, maybe older. She looked like someone's grandmother standing alone in a storm. He walked over to her. "Ma'am," he said gently. She looked up at him with sharp blue eyes that were watering from the cold. "Are you okay?" She smiled, but it was a stiff smile, the kind a person makes when they are too cold to move their face properly. "I am fine, thank you," she said. Her voice was steady, educated, calm. "My driver was supposed to come. He seems to be running late. Do you have a phone to call him?" She looked at her small handbag and then looked up again. "I left my phone in the car, I think. When I got out. I was only going in for a minute, and then the door locked behind me." She paused. "It has been about 40 minutes. 40 minutes. In this cold." Daniel did not say anything else. He took off his coat and held it out to her. She looked at the coat, then at him. "Absolutely not," she said firmly. "You need that." "I have a sweater under it," he said. This was true, though it was a thin sweater. "And I run warm." Both of these things were partly true and partly not. But he kept his arm out, holding the coat, and after another moment, she let him drape it over her shoulders. She pulled it around herself and closed her eyes briefly, like someone who had just come in from the rain. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That is very kind." He stood beside her, hands in his jeans pockets, the cold biting into his arms now. They waited. He asked if she wanted to share the bench. She said yes. They sat down together, an unlikely pair, a tired young warehouse worker and a well-spoken old woman, watching the snow fall on Meridian Avenue. Her name was Margaret. She did not give her last name, and he did not ask. She asked for his, and he told her. She asked what he did. He told her about the warehouse. She nodded. She asked if he had a family, and he smiled and said he had a son. Eli, 9 years old, loves maps and animals. He sounds wonderful, she said. He is, Daniel said. And then, without planning to, without meaning to open that door, he told her about the chest pains, about the tiredness, about the blue lips. He did not know why he told her. Maybe because she was a stranger. Maybe because he had been carrying it alone for so long that it just came out. She listened without interrupting. She did not offer empty words like, "I'm sure it's nothing." She just listened carefully, her eyes thoughtful. "Has he seen a doctor?" she asked. "A regular one, yes. They said it might be a heart murmur. They referred us to a specialist." He paused. "At Hargrove Children's Medical Center. And the appointment is in 3 weeks. But I got a letter last week. My insurance," he stopped. He rubbed his jaw. "My insurance doesn't cover most of it. And I looked up what the procedure might cost if Eli needs surgery. It's not a number I can reach." He said the last part quietly, without drama, the way a man says something he has accepted even though it is breaking him. Margaret said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "Children are very resilient, but they also need the right help at the right time." "I know," Daniel said. The bus came before he could say anything more. Daniel stood and helped Margaret to her feet. She handed him back his coat. He started to say she could keep it a little longer, but she pressed it back into his hands firmly. "You've already given me more than the coat," she said. "You gave me company when I needed it." He helped her onto the bus and found her a seat. She thanked him again. He nodded, smiled, and moved to stand near the back. By the time the bus reached his stop 20 minutes later, she was at the front, turned away, looking out the window. He got off without saying goodbye. It did not feel necessary. The moment had been what it had been, small, human, real. He walked home through the snow, his coat back on, his hands in his pockets. He thought about Eli. He thought about the letter from the insurance company. He thought about the number he had seen on the hospital's website, the estimated cost of a pediatric cardiac procedure. He pushed the thoughts down, the way he always did, because thinking too hard about a wall does not move it. You just have to find the door. He got home, made grilled cheese sandwiches, sat with Eli while they watched a nature documentary about African elephants, and tucked his son in at 9 o'clock. He sat at the kitchen table afterward with the insurance letter in front of him and a cup of cold coffee, going over the numbers one more time. He did not know her last name. He did not know that the woman he had given his coat to on Meridian Avenue was Eleanor Margaret Hargrove. He did not know that Hargrove Children's Medical Center, the very hospital where his son's life might depend on getting the right treatment, carried her family name on its front wall, carved in stone. He only knew that it was cold outside and that he had done the right thing. And sometimes, that has to be enough. 3 weeks passed the way hard weeks always do, slowly during the day and too fast at night. Daniel worked his shifts, cooked his meals, and drove Eli to school every morning. The blue truck's permit got renewed. The grilled cheese sandwiches kept getting made. Life moved forward the way it had to, even when a man's heart was sitting heavy in his chest with worry he could not fully name. Eli had a good week, then a bad one. On Tuesday of the second week, he woke up in the middle of the night complaining that his chest felt funny. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed for an hour, hand on his son's back, feeling the rise and fall of his breathing, watching his face until the boy drifted back to sleep. Daniel did not sleep again that night. He sat in the kitchen with the light off, listening to the wind outside, going through the math in his head again. The insurance would cover a portion. He had a small amount saved. He could take a loan. But even with all of that added together, there was still a gap, a wide, deep gap between what he had and what Eli might need. He had called the hospital twice to ask about financial assistance programs. The first time, he was put on hold for 20 minutes and then disconnected. The second time, a kind but overwhelmed woman told him to fill out a form online and that it could take up to 60 days to review. 60 days. He filled out the form the same night, then sat there looking at the submitted screen for a long time, wondering if anyone would actually read it. The appointment at Hargrove Children's Medical Center was on a Friday morning. Daniel took the day off work without pay, dressed Eli in his best sweater, and drove across the city. The hospital was a large, clean building with wide glass windows and a name carved deep into the stone above the entrance. Daniel had driven past it a few times before, but never been inside. It was the kind of place that felt serious the moment you walked in. Not unfriendly, but serious. The kind of place where the work done inside truly mattered. The pediatric cardiology department was on the 4th floor. They checked in, filled out more paperwork, and sat in a waiting room with soft chairs and a corner full of books and toys for children. Eli picked up a book about deep-sea fish and sat cross-legged on the floor, already absorbed. Daniel watched him and felt the particular ache that fathers feel when they see their children being children, innocent of the fear that surrounds them. The cardiologist was a tall, soft-spoken man named Dr. Anand. He was thorough and patient, and he explained everything clearly. He ran an echocardiogram and reviewed Eli's medical history. He did not rush. When it was over, he sat across from Daniel in his office and folded his hands. The diagnosis was a congenital heart defect, something Eli had been born with, something that had likely been there all along, but had only recently begun to cause symptoms. It was called a ventricular septal defect, a small hole between the two lower chambers of the heart. In some children, these closed on their own. In Eli's case, the defect was significant enough that it would not close without help. Without surgical repair, the condition would worsen. With surgery, the outlook was very good. Dr. Anand said this clearly and carefully, the way doctors do when they want a parent to be scared enough to act, but not so scared they fall apart. Daniel nodded through all of it. He asked good questions. He kept his voice steady. And then, after he shook Dr. Anand's hand and walked back to where Eli was still reading his fish book, he sat down beside his son, put his arm around him, and looked at the floor for a moment. "You okay, Dad?" Eli asked without looking up from the book. "Yeah, buddy," Daniel said. "I'm good." He was not good, but he was going to be. That was the decision he made in that moment, quietly and without drama, because that is how fathers make decisions when there is no other option. They were getting ready to leave when a woman stopped them in the hallway just outside the waiting room. She was carrying a folder and wearing a hospital lanyard with her name and the words "Patient Services" printed below it. She was young, maybe 26, with a professional manner and a warm face. She asked if he was Daniel Mercer. He was surprised. He said yes. She introduced herself as Priya and said she worked in the Patient Advocacy and Assistance Office. She said she had been asked to speak with him. She smiled kindly when she saw the confusion on his face. "Someone requested that we look into your file and your financial assistance application," she said. It was already being reviewed when the request came in. "The review has been completed." Daniel stared at her. "Who made the request?" Priya hesitated for just a moment. "I'm not able to share that information," she said carefully. "But I can tell you what the outcome is, if you'd like to hear it." He said yes. She told him that Eli's surgery would be fully covered. Not partially, not mostly, fully, including the surgery itself, the anesthesia, the follow-up care, the hospital stay, and the post-surgical rehabilitation visits. The balance that his insurance would not cover was being taken care of through the hospital's charitable foundation. She handed him a folder with the details printed out and a contact number for any questions. Daniel stood in the hallway of Hargrove Children's Medical Center and read the first page of that folder 3 times. Then he looked up at Priya. "I don't understand," he said. "Things like this don't just happen." "Sometimes they do," she said gently. He pressed her a little more. He asked if she could at least tell him whether this came from a person or a program. She thought about it, then said, "It came from a person. That is all I can say." He thanked her. His voice cracked slightly at the end of the thank you, which embarrassed him a little. She smiled like it did not, and walked back down the hall. He stood there another moment. Eli tugged his sleeve. "Can we get lunch?" "I'm hungry." "Yeah," Daniel said. He picked up the folder and tucked it under his arm. "Yeah, we can get lunch." They ate at a small diner 2 blocks from the hospital. Eli had a grilled cheese, his favorite, same as always. Daniel had coffee and a bowl of soup and sat across from his son watching him eat and talk about the fish book and ask if deep-sea fish could survive in Lake Michigan and whether an anglerfish was technically also a lantern. Daniel answered each question seriously, the way Eli liked. But part of his mind was somewhere else, trying to trace the invisible line that connected a bus stop on Meridian Avenue to a folder sitting on a diner table in front of him. He kept coming back to the old woman. Margaret. He did not know why. There was nothing obvious to connect her to any of this. She was just a woman at a bus stop. He had given her his coat for 20 minutes. She had given it back. They had ridden a bus together. That was it. And yet something about her, the way she had listened when he talked about Eli, the way she had said, "Children need the right help at the right time," sat in the back of his mind like a song, he could not quite remember the name of. He told himself it was a coincidence. He told himself the application had simply moved faster than expected, that some charitable fund had simply had money available. These things happened. Hospitals had programs. People got help sometimes. He had gotten lucky. That was the simple explanation, and he held it. But he thought about her again that night, after Eli was in bed. He thought about how she had given him back the coat with 2 hands, like she was returning something she had borrowed and wanted to return properly. He thought about her sharp blue eyes and the way she listened, not like someone being polite, but like someone who was actually thinking. He did not have her last name. He did not have her number. He had no way to find her, and even if he could, he was not sure what he would say. Thank you? For what? She had just been an old woman at a bus stop. He sat with that thought for a while. Then he went to bed. The surgery was scheduled for the following month. Dr. Anand had an opening, and Daniel took it immediately. He called his mother in Milwaukee and told her. She cried a little and said she would come and stay with them. He called Eli's school and spoke with his teacher, who said kind things and offered to send work home. He called his boss at the warehouse, who was gruff but fair, and told him to take whatever time he needed and that his job would be there. Everything was moving. Everything was in motion now. And Daniel, for the first time in weeks, felt something unfamiliar settle over him as he lay in the dark. It took him a moment to name it. It was not happiness exactly. It was not relief. Not yet, because the surgery had not happened and his son was not yet through it. But it was close to those things. It was the feeling of a man who has been carrying something very heavy for a long time, who has just been told he does not have to carry it alone. He stared at the ceiling for a while. Then he closed his eyes. For the first time in a long time, he slept. The morning of Eli's surgery was gray and still. The snow had stopped, but it lay thick and undisturbed on the rooftops and parked cars outside. Daniel woke before his alarm, as he had every morning for the past 2 weeks. He showered, made oatmeal that neither of them had much appetite for, and helped Eli put on his jacket and shoes. His mother, Ruth, was already up too, sitting at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, watching them both with steady eyes. She did not say much. She had learned over the years that her son did not need words in moments like this. He needed to move, to keep his hands busy. So she let him move. They drove to the hospital in the dark blue quiet of early morning. Eli sat in the back seat and looked out the window. He had asked good questions over the past weeks, smart, honest questions that showed he understood more than most 9-year-olds would. Daniel had answered them all as honestly as he could, using simple language, being careful not to frighten him more than necessary, but also not hiding the truth. Eli deserved the truth. He always had. In the car, Eli was quiet for most of the ride. Then he said, "Dad, will it hurt?" "You'll be asleep," Daniel said. "You won't feel anything. And when I wake up, it might be sore for a bit, but they'll give you medicine for that." Eli nodded. He looked out the window again. Then he said, "I'm not scared." Daniel glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "It's okay if you are." "I know," Eli said. "But I'm not." Daniel believed him. His son had always been that way, calm in the middle of things that would make other children cry. It was one of the things that made Daniel both proud and quietly heartbroken, because he knew that kind of calm often comes from a child who has grown used to hard things. He wanted Eli to be a boy, not a small man. But life had made them both what they were. They checked in at the hospital and were taken to a pre-surgical room where nurses came in and out, kind and efficient, explaining each step as it happened. Dr. Anand came in before the surgery to speak with Daniel once more. He was calm and confident. He answered every question thoroughly. He shook Daniel's hand, and then, in a small but important gesture, he also shook Eli's hand, which made Eli sit up a little straighter and look pleased. When the time came and the nurses began to wheel Eli's bed toward the surgical corridor, Daniel walked alongside it, as far as he was allowed. Eli reached out and grabbed his father's hand. Daniel held it tight. "I'll be right here," Daniel said. "Right here the whole time." Eli let go at the doors. He gave a small nod, the way he always did when he had decided something was going to be fine. The doors swung closed. Daniel stood there for a moment, hands at his sides, and then turned and walked back to the waiting room where his mother was sitting with 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one without saying anything. He sat down beside her. They waited. It was during the 3rd hour of waiting that she walked in. Daniel almost did not recognize her at first. She was dressed differently from the bus stop. She wore a dark blue coat, good shoes, and carried herself with the particular ease of someone who is comfortable in a place. But when she turned her head and he saw those sharp blue eyes scanning the room, he knew immediately who she was. Margaret. She saw him at almost the same moment. Something moved across her face, a small expression, almost private, as if she had just confirmed something she had expected to find. She crossed the room and stood in front of him. He stood up without thinking. "Hello, Daniel," she said. "Hello," he said. And then, because nothing else came, he said it again. "Hello." She sat down in the chair across from him, and he sat back down. His mother, Ruth, looked between them with quiet curiosity, but said nothing. "How is he doing?" Margaret asked. "He's in surgery," Daniel said. "He's been in for about 3 hours. They said it would take 4 to 6. He paused. "How did you know we were here today?" She looked at him calmly. "I have a small connection to this hospital," she said. "A family connection. When your file came through the foundation and I saw the name. Eli Mercer, 9 years old, father named Daniel. I recognized it." "You remembered my name?" he said. "I remember things," she said simply. He looked at her for a long moment. The pieces had been arranging themselves in his mind since the hallway with Priya, but he had not let himself put them fully together. Now he did. "Hargrove," he said quietly. She nodded once. "The hospital. My late husband built it," she said. "His name was James Hargrove. He built it 31 years ago because our daughter needed cardiac surgery, and there was no pediatric cardiac center in this part of the city. She got the care she needed, and he spent the rest of his life making sure other children could too." She folded her hands in her lap. "He passed away 7 years ago. I oversee the foundation now." Daniel sat with this for a moment. Outside the window, the sky had lightened to a pale winter gray. "The day at the bus stop," he said. "That was real. You really were just stranded there." "Yes," she said. "My driver had a flat tire 2 streets over and couldn't reach me. I had genuinely left my phone in the car." She allowed herself a small smile. "I was very cold. And you had no idea who I was." "None at all," she said. "You were simply a man who gave me his coat when he did not have to." She paused. "That is not a small thing, Daniel. Most people walked past me. Some looked and looked away. You walked over." He did not know what to say to that. "When I saw your name connected to a file at the foundation," she continued, "I did not decide to help you because you had helped me. I want you to understand that. The foundation reviews applications based on need. Eli's case qualified on every measure. What I did was make sure the review happened quickly and that nothing fell through the cracks, as these things sometimes do in large institutions." She looked at him steadily. "I moved the process along. That is all." "That is not all," he said. She accepted that with a slight dip of her head. Ruth, who had been listening in complete silence, reached over and put her hand on her son's arm. The 4 of them, Daniel, Ruth, and the quiet presence of everything unsaid, sat together in that waiting room for another hour. Margaret did not leave. She did not check her phone or look at her watch. She sat with them the way a person sits with family, comfortable in the stillness. She and Ruth talked a little, softly, about nothing in particular. Daniel drank his coffee and watched the clock. When Dr. Anand appeared in the doorway, his face was open and calm. He walked directly to Daniel. "Surgery went very well," he said. "Better than expected, honestly. Eli is in recovery now. He'll be awake in about an hour. He's strong." Daniel stood. He pressed the back of his hand to his mouth for a moment. Then he exhaled, long and slow, and nodded. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you." Dr. Anand shook his hand warmly and left to speak with a nurse. Ruth was already crying quietly, dabbing at her eyes with her sleeve. Daniel turned around. Margaret was standing. She had her coat on. She had known, it seemed, that this was the right moment to go. "Thank you," Daniel said to her. The words felt too small for what he meant, but they were the only ones he had. "Take care of your boy," she said. "I will." He hesitated. "Can I? Is there something I can do? For the foundation, or?" She shook her head gently. "You already did something," she said. "On Meridian Avenue. On a cold Thursday." She straightened her gloves. That was enough. She walked out of the waiting room and into the corridor, and a moment later she was gone. Daniel stood there a little longer, in the middle of that bright, warm hospital room, with his mother beside him and his son down the hall waking up into a healthier life. He thought about kindness. how it moves through the world in ways you cannot track or predict. How a coat given to a stranger on a frozen street corner can travel farther than you ever imagined. How good things, done quietly and without expectation, do not disappear. They go somewhere. They do something. You just don't always get to see it. Eli was out of the hospital in 4 days. He went home with a small scar on his chest and strict instructions to rest for 3 weeks, which he followed with much less protest than Daniel expected. He spent those weeks reading, drawing maps, and asking questions about deep-sea fish. He put a sticker of an anglerfish on his bedroom door. He started eating better, sleeping longer, and gradually his color came back, a healthy, ordinary, wonderful pink that Daniel had not fully realized was missing until it returned. Daniel wrote a letter to the Hargrove Foundation thanking them for their support. He addressed it formally and kept his words careful and grateful and real. He did not know if Margaret would read it. He wrote it as if she would. And somewhere in the city, in a quiet office with her husband's name on the wall and a window looking out over the skyline, Eleanor Margaret Hargrove picked up the letter, unfolded it, and read it slowly. She folded it again when she was done, held it in both hands for a moment, and placed it carefully in the top drawer of her desk. She thought about Meridian Avenue. She thought about the cold. She thought about a tired young man in a green coat who had walked over when everyone else had kept walking. She closed the drawer. Some stories don't need an ending. They are already whole.